So I've recently gone from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day over the past several months and have honestly found it to be one of the most impactful changes that I've pretty much ever made to my dietary strategy. And so in this video, what I want to do is kind of walk you through my reasoning as to why I made this switch, as well as why I feel it's made such a dramatic impact on my life. And so let's go ahead and dive in.
Dear 8 pound, 6 ounce, newborn infant Jesus, don't even know a word yet.
Now, I do think it's worth noting here that I have tried a ton of different types of eating styles over the years. A bunch of popular eating styles, like many of us. I grew up eating 3 meals a day. I got to college and switched to more like a 5 to 6 meals per day in order to maximize the gains. And after that, kind of switched back to more of like a 3 square meals per day, and also experimented a lot with several different types of intermittent fasting, mainly 16/8 intermittent fasting, where I would do 3 or 2 meals within an 8-hour feeding window. But I've also experimented a lot with things like 1 meal per day and a lot of extended fasting. So I've done 3-day fasts, 5-day fasts, even up to 10 days of water fasting. And so I say all that to say that I am very well acquainted with the various styles and patterns of eating that are extremely popular on every corner of the internet. However, what I've personally found, especially over the past several months, is that this very specific style of 2 meals per day has pretty much been the most effective and most natural style of eating that I've pretty much ever tried. Now, one of the major reasons that I made the switch to 2 meals a day and this very specific style of 2 meals per day is largely because all of these other styles of eating patterns really had one or two major drawbacks that made them somewhat impractical for me long term. For instance, the 5 to 6 meals per day is really impractical simply because you're just simply eating all day. And especially when you're kind of bombarding your body with calories for the entirety of the day, you tend to feel a little bit sluggish. You're always digesting some form of food. And so I really didn't enjoy that. Yes, it was great for building muscle mass and optimizing muscle mass, but overall, when you look at your life from a holistic perspective, it just really didn't serve my overall goals within the context of my life. Now, when it comes to intermittent fasting, especially like the 2 to 3 meals per day within an 8-hour feeding window, that also had some benefits as well. Namely, it improved focus during that 16-hour fasting window. However, within the context of that 8-hour feeding window, I felt really sluggish within that specific feeding window, and it made it really difficult to consume enough calories and protein because you're restricting the amount of time that you're able to get those nutrients in throughout the day. And so I didn't really enjoy intermittent fasting long term. And then things like 1 meal per day also had some extremely similar downsides when compared to things like intermittent fasting. It's just really hard to maintain muscle mass and maintain performance, cognitive and physical performance. And so this is really when I switched to more of a 3 square meal per day eating style over the past several years. However, the main downside to 3 meals per day that I was personally experiencing was just the incessant need to take a nap after lunch. Now, on a lot of days, this was okay because I could structure my day in such a way as to be able to afford eating a fairly large meal at lunchtime and then taking a nap before getting some more work done in the afternoon or going to the gym in the afternoon. However, when we added our third kid to our home in October of last year, it just became extremely impractical for me because of time constraints to be able to afford to be able to take a nap every day. And so because of this, I was looking for some sort of alternative to be able to skip lunch and not feel the need to take a nap after lunch. And I've tried every type of dietary strategy, limiting calories, limiting carbohydrates at lunch, and nothing really seemed to kind of eliminate that afternoon dip that I would experience every day after lunch. And this is really what kind of tuned me into a 2 meal a day eating style, was just simply asking the question, do I even need to eat lunch? However, the last nail in the coffin for me for switching from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day was really when I started doing some studying on historical eating patterns. And this really kind of stemmed out of my study into how to optimize the circadian rhythm through food intake. And what you find is that when you look at the various cultures throughout history, specifically the post-agrarian and post-agricultural revolution societies, as well as the pre-industrial revolution societies, is that almost all of them adhered to a 2 meal per day eating structure. Now, as a side note here, one thing that almost every single culture in society has highly valued over the past several thousand years is actually salt, which is why today's video is sponsored by Element. Almost every single culture in society throughout history has heavily prized the value of various sodium and magnesium salts for the purpose of taste, but as well as for performance and health. And one of the reasons I like Element so well is that they've done all of the hard work of figuring out the perfect proportion of sodium, magnesium, and potassium to put into a singular salt supplement for the purpose of improving gym performance and cognitive performance, as well as your overall health. Now, another thing I like about Element is that they don't contain any of the garbage that tons of other products on the market contain, things like artificial sweeteners and artificial flavors. And on top of that, they're currently offering you guys a free sample pack with any order. And so if you guys are looking for a convenient way to increase your electrolyte intake at the gym or at the office, make sure to check out the link down below or go to drinkelement.com/nutritionlibrary to snag this offer. Now, it's not always helpful to look at the way past generations have done various things, namely eating, and then just blanketly assume that that's the proper way to do things today. However, in this specific scenario, I do think there is a lot that history has to teach us about the way that we should be eating. And the reason for that is that the dietary sciences is a very murky and cloudy area. There is a ton of different opposing conclusions that you can draw based on the various studies that you may be looking at the moment. And because of this, sometimes it's best to just simply look back at history and draw on the wisdom of thousands and thousands of years of human history to kind of give us at least a little bit of a clue as to what is most biologically appropriate for humans. Now, the reason I like to look at the agrarian societies as opposed to the Paleolithic societies is that when you look at the agrarian cultures are essentially food patterns that emerged in the abundance of food. Hunter-gatherer tribes, their culture and society largely centered around food scarcity, their ability to hunt and gather, and most of their time was spent literally just trying to find food. However, that is not the type of environment that we live in, and so when you're asking yourself the question, what is the most biologically appropriate eating pattern, it helps to more so look at the cultures that also had an abundance of food. In the scenario where there is an abundance of food, what is the natural eating pattern that emerges in those types of societies? And what you find is that they are in fact eating only 2 meals per day. For instance, in ancient Rome, the ancient Romans were known to eat only 2 meals per day. A morning meal known as Ian Teculum, as well as the primary meal of the day, which was known as Cena. The Scandinavian Vikings also had a 2-meal-a-day system where they had a morning meal, a mid-morning meal called Dagmal, and an evening meal known as Nattmaal. In medieval Europe, the Europeans back then were known to have only 2 meals a day, dinner, which was a midday meal, as well as supper, which was the evening meal. And then in pre-industrial France, they were also known to have 2 meals a day, the late morning meal being known as déjeuner. And then in pre-industrial Italy, they also had 2 meals a day. Main midday meal known as pranzo, and the lighter evening meal known as cena. And so pretty much every single agrarian culture in society over the past several thousand years has implemented some form or fashion of this 2 meal a day system. And the reason for this is because it most aligns with their biological clock and the rhythm of the sun. All of these agrarian societies were extremely dependent on the sun because of the lack of the invention of artificial light and because their dependence on the sun to grow crops. And so a lot of these different cultures would wake up in the morning time at the crack of dawn. They would perform a few hours of light labor around the home, sit down for their first large meal of the day, which would then fuel their hard labor for the day. And then they would work throughout the entirety of the day. They would get done with their work in the evening time, eat another large meal to recover from the day, go to bed, and then rinse and repeat. However, all of this changed during the Industrial Revolution when workers stopped working and tilling their own fields or fields that they were renting, and then more so moved to urban centers to find labor in industrial factories. And what these laborers were finding was that it was nearly impossible to implement 2 meals a day when you're having to leave your home at the crack of dawn and you don't get back until after sunset. And so it's in that type of situation, it's nearly impossible to eat a singular meal before you leave the home and have that to fuel you for your entire day. And so what started to end up happening was we kind of switched more to a light breakfast, a heavier lunch, and then a larger dinner after the workday. And this has kind of been the style of eating that most of us are really accompanied to. However, what a lot of people don't understand is that there was also a massive marketing campaign during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution led by John Harvey Kellogg as well as C.W. Post, which are manufacturers of cereal grains that were also kind of taking advantage of this new felt need to have a convenient breakfast in the morning before you go to your factory job. And so they were really pushing this idea that you need 3 meals a day because it really fed into their business structure of kind of marketing this idea that you need cereal grains as a cheap, convenient and effective source of nutrients and calories to support your workday. However, the argument that I'm trying to make is that overall the 3 meal a day structure, one, is a very recent phenomenon, and two, most likely isn't the most biologically appropriate way to consume your calories throughout the day. Yes, it can be convenient to be able to kind of eat a light morning snack in the morning while you're on the go to kind of hold you over until lunchtime. However, the 3 meal a day system does present one major drawback, which is after lunch you just feel like crashing. A lot of us have experienced this midday slump, and I'm personally convinced that this is because we haven't aligned our eating pattern with our biological clock. Now, there's no real hardcore scientific evidence to absolutely prove this. However, I do think it's interesting that when you remove the constraint of labor and work and having to be somewhere for work early in the morning until late in the evening, that humans naturally drift to this 2 meal per day style of eating. On Sundays, a lot of us, when you have nowhere to go, end up drifting to just a brunch and a dinner. And to me, this is a strong indication that biologically, this is what is most natural to us. And so my argument simply is that if this is the style of eating that's most natural, why not take advantage of it and implement it on a daily basis? Now, one of the main benefits that I've experienced personally from a 2 meal per day eating style, 1 brunch style meal at mid-morning as well as a dinner meal, is simply that I don't experience energy dips throughout the day. Specifically right after lunchtime, there is no dip in energy levels. I'm able to work consistently throughout the midday period, and even in the morning time, what I'm able to do is kind of wake up with my kids. I'm able to get some light reading done, do a little bit of journaling, send some emails, let the chickens out of the coop, come back in and consume a fairly hefty protein-rich meal without it absolutely crushing me. Because I'm more insulin sensitive in the morning, I can eat a fairly large meal in the morning time time as my primary daytime meal, and then still have plenty of energy for the rest of the day to get the bulk of my work done. And then when I get done with my work, I'm able to come home, eat another hefty meal in the evening time, which helps me to sleep in the evening time. And so what I've personally found is that it's just a extremely natural eating pattern that helps to kind of optimize not just muscle growth and lean mass retention because of the distance between the meals. I'm able to increase my protein intake, but it's also fantastic for productivity, which is another huge reason that I'm a huge fan of this 2 meal a day system.